Imagine this. You're a police monster in hometown. You don't have much to do because the mayor takes care of most of the actual problems. You're itching for some excitement, waiting for something to happen. And then you get a call from your boss's ex-wife. She's panicking. She thinks there's someone outside her house. They slashed her tires. This could be an actual crime. So what do? You tell her to wait. You'll be right there. So she does. In fact, she waits so long that she falls asleep. And her child opens a gateway to another dimension. And they star in a TV show full of minigames. And they hang out backstage for a bit, play another game, watch the Weather Channel have romantic issues, and on 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 and on. Hey, the kids found their kidnapped mom. And now they're fighting the kidnapper, and maybe they've engaged Toblerone for a bit, and you're taking too long. Undyne, where the f are you? That's what we're going to answer in this video today. What could she possibly have been doing that took her so long? Did she just not think it was important? Clearly not, since she still came in the middle of the night instead of waiting for dawn. So was there just a lot of crime that took up her time that night? That also seems unlikely, because as we've mentioned, nothing ever happens in hometown. What are the odds that this night, of all nights, Undyne suddenly was too busy to show up? And yet, that's exactly what seems to have happened. Toriel mentions that she finally got through after several attempts of calling the police. What else was happening in hometown that night? Why was the line busy? I believe I've got the answer. Nothing. Nothing important was happening. At least not really. Let's talk about Mayor Holiday. I've seen some people suggest that Chris's plan for Chapter 3 involved opening the Dark World to lure Undyne into their house. That made some sense when Chapter 2 dropped, but I don't think it holds up given what we know now. Specifically, that's because of Mayor Holiday. She's the mayor. With her authority, she can get Undyne to go pretty much anywhere, follow her into any desolate location. At the very least, there would have had to have been a better way to get Undyne alone than this convoluted plan. And I think that was the point. The plan wasn't actually to attract Undyne. The plan was to distract her, because they anticipated that Toriel would call the cops. Mayor Holiday could just give Undyne busy work and false emergencies to keep her occupied. The Roaring Gang could finish their business in TV World, and Chris could seal the fountain just in time for Undyne to never see a thing. But things didn't go according to plan. That didn't happen. Undyne arrived before the mission was complete, and had to be kidnapped to prevent her becoming an actual problem for the Roaring Gang. After all, Undyne could use her resources and authority to create a lot of problems for them going forward, once she knows what she's actually looking for. At the very least, she'd be a much bigger threat than the town delinquent, a headband, and the mole. At minimum, you'd think they'd want to limit the number of witnesses, so kidnapping Undyne would make some amount of sense in that scenario. Now, I could see two problems with this theory. The first being the phone call to Chris in Chapter 4. Most people have taken this to mean that Undyne is going to be a sacrifice for some kind of ritual, which is why she needed to be kidnapped and lured into the Dark World. However, I'm not convinced. The way that the phone voice speaks feels like we're not getting the full context. The ellipses and broken speech, I think, are meant to be a visualization of us only hearing some of the conversation. Which is also why we don't hear Carol's voice blips on the phone, while later in Chapter 4 we do. This is pure speculation on my part, but I actually think it's very likely we'll hear this phone call again in a flashback with some very important added context. Regardless, I at least think that there's enough doubt about what the plan is and what's going on that we can't be 100% certain Undyne was the victim at all. The other question you might be asking is, why did Chris slash the tires and open the door if the goal wasn't to draw out Undyne? Why not just open the dark fountain and, wait for them to show up? I think there are a couple of possibilities. Maybe it was a signal. Maybe they wanted to make sure Toriel wouldn't lock herself in her bedroom. Maybe it was making sure that Susie was staying the night so she could help seal the fountain. Maybe Chris is just bad at being evil. We already know that they didn't think to put a lid on the box to stop the soul from escaping, so maybe they just, assumed that if they were going to unlock the door, they should just keep it open. The point is, there's a lot of potential answers, and I don't think we even need a specific one to justify this. It could very easily just be something that we fill in the holes ourselves, if and when we get this explanation. I firmly believe that this is also true. Undyne took so long to arrive because she was intentionally being stalled by the Roaring Gang to prevent her from interfering. Okay, Fair enough. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe you don't believe me, but that's my theory. And it would make sense. Except, why the frick was the Roaring Knight late too? This was your evil plan, my guy. Where were you? I have an answer. I do. But before we dive into it, we need to discuss something very, very important. Who is the Roaring Knight? Now, let's apply some basic logic here. Roaring Knight has antlers. The holidays have antlers. Therefore, the night is a holiday. Or papyrus, but like, it's a holiday, right? We're all agreeing on that. On a crazy basis to start with. Okay, good. Now, let's look at each of them to see what that would entail. Let's start with Noelle. Nobody suspects Noelle, because she clearly has no idea what's happening. But that doesn't really prove her innocence, does it? Because we know she's repressing memories. We know she'll kill someone if she's asked to. You could maybe argue that why didn't Queen recognize her in Chapter 2? But Queen was tricked by a freaking box. So definitely not out of the question there. And also we know that Noelle is capable of a lot of power, even if she's not aware of it. So it's possible that Noelle is the Roaring Knight through some weird split personality or sleeper agent type thing that makes her switch to night mode. Her personality and actions alone don't necessarily clear her. What does clear her is the fact that she has a really solid alibi. We left her and Carol in Noelle's house right before we went to the church. The Knight was already inside the church when we got there. There's no way they made it there before us. You could, hypothetically, go to Toriel's house first, which then would have potentially given them the ability to slip past you. But since that's optional, I don't think we can necessarily take it as canon that definitely happened. It's entirely possible that you go pretty much straight there. So I'm comfortable using this to cross both Noelle and Carol off list of suspects. Yeah, there could be some way that they did it. They could have access to the same weird teleporting thing that Rouse does, which then begs the question, why were they not there on time if they can teleport? But if we start suspecting them, I think we should just go full pirates at that point, May as well go balls to the wall with it. Okay, so it's not Noelle. It's probably not Carol. What about this? She's a great candidate. She's Gaster coded. We know nothing about her, what she's doing. Anything could be her fault. She could be anywhere. There's hints that she's definitely involved in something, somehow. Also, this sprite that we've got on screen here is taken from the sword root, where you can't actually see it because it's been corrupted into something else, which could easily be meant to symbolize her being corrupted into the Roaring Knight. Also, has a back. Roaring Knight kind of has a back too. Now, I don't dwell on this too much because if you've heard any Deltarune theories in the past month or so, you've already heard this argument. A lot already. It's a good conclusion. It's plausible. However, for the purposes of this topic, there's one major reason we can't accept that answer. There's no point discussing it at that point. We can't solve shit. I plan on making another video going into what Death Knight would mean for the story going forward, but for the purposes of this particular question, if Death is the Knight, we should just stop this discussion here. She's Gaster coded. Anything is possible for her. She could be the Knight. I can't disprove that. But there's no way of knowing why she'd be late when she could have been doing anything. Maybe she only exists in the Dark World. She could be anywhere. She could be anything. The Knight, lost in the code, inside of Chris's soul, inside the Dark Fountains, locked away in the bunker, dead, at college. She could even be Papyrus. There's no way to know. So we can't cross her off the list of suspects, but we can end the discussion about her here, because I don't think we would have anywhere near enough knowledge about Death at this point to draw any sort of theory. We could just make anything up and it could be true. There's no real way to continue this in a way that matters. So if we want to get through this, we only have one hope, one answer that might lead us anywhere, and it's Rudy Holiday. It's not a great option. We've got very little to stand on here. He can barely go to church, let alone go walking all the way to the Dreamer household, let alone carry a grown woman across town while running. He's incredibly chill. He doesn't seem to want to destroy the world. And unlike the woman in his family, doesn't have a bat, doesn't have a katana. Basically, Rudy is the hardest no out of the Holiday family at a first glance. There's just way too many holes in Rudy Knight theory. His chill vibes, his love for Noelle, his inability to carry a caked up police fish across town while running, his illness, there's just no way. The whole video is pointless. We cannot draw any meaningful conclusions from the Night Slate list because our only possible Knight candidate is someone we know so little about. Except now it's not, because Rudy isn't as off the table as you might think at first. Now let's break it down one step at a time, starting with the objections that Rudy's character wouldn't do this. His personality wouldn't allow it. He totally would. He's made it clear that he will fight to protect his family. Yes, he's joking in most of the scenes where he threatens to kick someone's ass, but does anyone actually doubt that if his family was in danger, he wouldn't try and kick your ass? If the only way to save his family involves risking the world, do we honestly doubt he'd do it? He seems to love his family a lot. He married Carol, after all, and it's clear to me at least that he respects her. He tells Chris that he and Carol balance each other out, which implies that he thinks she's just as good a parent as he is. He's just the more chill person. But he does still trust Carol's judgment and believe her to be a good person. If she was driven to those lengths to save Des, I don't think it's out of the question that he could be convinced to follow her. I don't think it's out of Rudy's character, it's just that it would be a facet of him that we have yet to explore in-game. So okay, maybe it's not bad writing from a character perspective that Rudy's the Knight. But it wouldn't make very much logical sense, would it? He'd have to be faking his illness to be running around town doing Knight shenanigans, right? I don't think so. I think he has darkness cancer. Okay, hear me out. Rudy has never mentioned that he's being treated for his illness. Whenever it gets brought up, he says the doctors are still running tests. Now, that could be him in denial, sure. But if his illness is supernatural in nature, it could explain things as well. Maybe the doctors can't identify what's wrong with him because Rudy already knows what's wrong with him. It's darkness, and his only hope is to do whatever the heck the Ruling Knight's shenanigans is. That's why he thinks he'll get better. He has to get better. And he's going to do whatever it takes to get better. But also explain that weird thing in the Knight's chest. That's just, darkness cancer. This is what cancer looked like as a Darkner, I imagine. And furthermore, it does explain one thing that's very important to this discussion. Why was the Knight taking so long? It's the only explanation that has any weight to it to this question. If this theory is true, it's because Rudy overestimated himself. He believed he could get to the Dreamer house without issue, but his failing health slowed him down way too much. I'd like to direct your attention to this video. What if Rudy were the Roaring Knight? It's a video by creator Legacy Under. Its goal is clearly to be a joke about how impossible the Knight's actions would be for Rudy. But if anything, this video serves as proof that it's possible. You'll notice something very important about the locations of the Dark Fountains if you pay attention to this video. Nearly all of them are located very close to the hospital, the only exception being the one that Chris opened himself. The rest are easily locations Rudy could hypothetically walk to, if he can walk anywhere. Aside from QC's diner, it's all of the buildings surrounding the hospital pretty much. And QC's diner is a privately owned building as opposed to the library and the school and the church, which all could reasonably be accessed by Carol and the Knight without needing anyone else's approval, unlike the diner, which, what point is, the only problem is the really big problem. Chapter 3's Dark Fountain. I can tell you that maybe Rudy was struggling to get there. He was, huffing and puffing on his way there. Sure, fair enough. But how could he have carried Undyne across town while being chased by Susie? That's the real question here. And the answer is Rudy cannot carry Undyne. He is, according to this theory, genuinely sick. My initial argument when I was first drafting this is that adrenaline is just a hell of a drug, but even then, that just does not make sense. Especially if he was already exhausted from getting there and he just got his ass beat by the Fungain. It is not possible. Rudy cannot carry Undyne. But what if that didn't matter? What if we got it all backwards? If Rudy can't carry Undyne, then perhaps it's possible that Undyne can carry Rudy. She does have the physical strength to bench press a car after all. Carrying Rudy while popped up on adrenaline isn't too far of a stretch. Let me tell you a story. One possible way I can see this reveal happening. It's Chapter 6. The Fungang has the codes. We're in the bunker's dark world searching for Undyne. She's presumably been trapped by a Darkner that the Roaring Knight appointed, and the Knight itself has just arrived and is pursuing the Fun Gang throughout the chapter. Sounds plausible so far, right? And let's say we find Undyne. We start doing a puzzle to free her, and just as we finish, the Knight shows up. Undyne takes an attack meant for Susie. She knocks the Knight's helmet off, but can't fight anymore. And then she says his name, or we see his face. Rudy. He beats us, maybe with Chris's help, thus revealing the betrayal of Susie, or maybe not. Regardless, Susie's just deeply confused. So Undyne starts explaining. She tells us how she got a call from Toriel, but couldn't come right away because the mayor kept asking for help. Eventually, Undyne got suspicious and went rogue to check on Toriel, but by that time it was almost too late. She managed to get the attention just before getting tackled out the door by him. And then all of a sudden I was back outside. I looked around for the creep, but I didn't see them. And I saw him, lying there on the lawn. I thought he must have come to visit, that he was another victim. Are you okay? What happened? Can you get up? He said 2 words to me. Shelter. Quickly. Looking back, it was obvious something was up, but it was all happening so fast. I acted on instinct. I wasn't thinking. I ran as fast as I could. I entered the codes and stepped inside the bunker. Figured some of the sciencey stuff might be able to help him. Maybe that was what he was after. But while my back was turned, that's what I believe happened. One short cutscene, maybe a couple lines of dialogue for Rudy mentioning it was harder than he thought to walk to Toriel's place from the hospital. At the very least, I don't think it's too convoluted to be plausible. In fact, I think it's weirdly likely. Now, there might be some pushback to this, and understandably so, because if this theory is correct, the shelter is a lot less important than we think it is. I mean, and it's always been seen as very important. It's got something to do with Gaster, and Gaster has something to do with the game. I don't doubt any of that. But the shelter belongs to Gaster, and the shelter is the Roaring Knights' home base, are not the same sentiment. According to Alphys and Lookie, Undyne herself is connected to the shelter. She has a code. Who's to say she doesn't have all 3? If she doesn't have all 3, then why didn't Alphys see her constantly going to the shelter? Was she just staring at it, hoping that she'd brute force the other 2 codes? Or is it more likely she already had all 3 codes, was investigating it over and over to try and clear her mentor's name? I do think the shelter holds a lot of secrets, but I don't think we can be certain that there was a dark role behind those doors for the entire game. If the shelter is, say, Gaster's old lab, a place where Des and Chris were lured after following the Tale of Hell, a place with a lot of history, other lore reveals to it, then it fits just as well. I can't tell you for certain that this theory is correct. Like I said, I want to investigate what it means Death of the Knight instead later on. But Rudy Knight isn't impossible, and I think it's worth looking into it as a possibility. That said, if everything I'm saying about Rudy Knight here is true, then there are some key takeaways from this that we need to keep in mind when you're applying this theory elsewhere. Firstly, the shelter, while probably a place with a lot of big reveals, isn't the central base of the Roaring Gang that we think it is. In fact, based on this theory, the shelter is probably nothing more than the place this all started. The Roaring Gang's real plans have nothing to do with Undyne or the shelter itself. And finally, we'll know that Rudy was infected by darkness at some point in the game's backstory. Based on the fact that he disappears after even Asgore, it's probably safe to guess this wasn't at the same time Des disappeared. Or if it was, it's getting steadily worse the whole time before that. Rudy also could have been infected while his wife was trying to find a way to save Des and something went wrong, or he might have intentionally done so just to gain power. What do you guys think? Did I miss anything important that totally debunks all this? Are you a Rudy Knight or a Des Knight believer? Let me know in the comments down below, and subscribe for more Deltarune theories in the future. I've already started working on one about how Des could be lost if she's actually the Roaring Knight, so look forward to that if you're a Des Knight believer. And until then, don't forget, I'm not crazy. Crazy people believe Susie is Alphys' mom, and I swear to God,